Hello, welcome to Lacey Walker Art. Today I'm going to be giving you a behind the scenes look at how I use metal textures and patinas to create really fun earrings. This is a little look at my spring line of earrings. Behind the scenes. The first thing I always do is I kind of plan out my shapes by cutting them out of paper that you'll see here, and I play around with a lot of different shapes before I decide what I'm going to be doing. After that, I carefully place the shapes on the metal that I'm planning to use, and I outline it with a Sharpie. And I try to do this in a way where my cuts are going to be easy to make, but I also make the most use out of the metal that I'm using. And I go ahead, and for this one, I'm going to be making 2 pairs out of the brass, so I need 2 of each element. And then I repeat that on any other metals that I am going to be doing. Once I have all of my jewelry shapes outlined, I go ahead and cut that piece away from the larger sheet of metal to make it easier to work with. And then I continue with cutting out each of the individual shapes. And I find when using these shears, it works if you use the shears in combination with turning the metal. This is the most complicated shape that I cut out, and it's because of that inner curve, and the key is to try to make sure you get that without really bending the metal too much beyond repair or letting the scissors kind of slice in accidentally to the opposite side and leaving some ugly marks. After doing this, it really does distort it a bit, and you kind of have to reshape it. And you repeat this process until all of your shapes are pretty well cut out, and repeat as necessary. Again, as I said, I usually use these with a combination of I move the shears around while also moving the metal, and I find that gives it a cleaner cut. Now that we're all done with our pieces, we can move on to the next step. The next part is to kind of fix and file, and this is what's going to help make sure that your final product actually looks really good, making sure that they're flat, making sure there are no sharp edges by filing off any of those sharp points. And I like to, for comfort, file down all of the harsh edges around the side, so in case it hits your neck, it's not unpleasant. Step number 4 is to clean. For this, I just use some rubbing alcohol and t-shirt scrap, and then I make sure to clean both sides to get off the Sharpie. It removes the Sharpie nicely, as well as the other side to remove any excess oils that I really kind of put onto the metal with my fingers. Once they're all clean, I line them up to make sure I have all the pieces together before we can move on to the next step. The next step is to punch the holes. And so what I do is, to give myself a guide, I line up each one where I'm going to have the connector holes and mark them with Sharpies. And then I use my metal hole punches to just line up right with the Sharpie, put the dot right on there, and punch it through. After having touched them, you might want to give them another rub with alcohol. Once everything is ready, it's time to move on to the patina. So you're going to want some sort of kind of non-stick plastic surface. I'm using a scrap from a plastic bag because this is going to get messy and I'm going to want to throw it away. This prevents the paint from sticking to the back surface in the metal. I've done this on paper and it doesn't work very well. In order to do this well, you're going to need some water to clean off a brush if you're using more than one color. I'm using a paper plate that I use for palettes sometimes, and you can see the nice clean side of it here. And we're going to need these Vintaj Patinas. I will leave a link to them from Amazon, or you can buy them from Hobby Lobby down in the description box. These patinas are more kind of like an enamel paint, and they need to be shaken very, very well. I've already pre-shaken this a bit, but just to illustrate the point, there's a little more shaking, and they do also get clogged. The opening is quite narrow, so sometimes you have to work with it a bit. I usually keep a piece of wire on hand in order to unclog the paint dispenser. And you don't need too much, but you do need enough to work with. So yes, here I go. Out of frame, showing you how to unclog it. And it helps a little bit. And sometimes you have to do that multiple times in order to get enough out. Once you have enough out, you can go ahead and take a dry brush and on the clean metal, just brush this paint right on here. You can do this in a couple ways. This one I did pretty thick, a thick layer of it, and it does make a nice smooth surface, but occasionally it settles and dries in a way where it's slightly darker in one certain area, so you can work in much thinner layers, and that works well. Although sometimes you see some of the brush strokes and you have to do multiple coats. So if you're impatient, you might want to consider doing it in one, but know that there are hazards to that. So now we're going to be moving on to a different color. And in order to do that, if I want to use the same brush, you need to really wash it off several times and make sure you get the brush as dry as possible. When you add water to these, they act kind of funny and sometimes they almost separate or start to pull away from the edges of the metal, so make sure you really dry your brush off in between colors. This is not shown here, but one of the fun things about these Vintaj patinas is you can actually mix colors. So in part of this collection I did lighten this green quite a bit with kind of a off-white color that I also have. In step number 7, you don't have to do much, but I'm putting it in as its own step because this is often the most tedious for me. Number 8 is to assemble the jewelry. I unfortunately did not film this part of the process. I used some ear wires and then I had to use some jump rings for part of this, and that's pretty simple to do. There are a lot of different tutorials on how to do that, so I won't waste your time, but here are a few action shots of me doing some of the behind the scenes on the other ones. And here's some of the jewelry, the finished jewelry. I really like how this collection turned out. I recently got a rolling mill, and so I was able to press those patterns onto the metal I had, and it was a lot of fun, and I think it adds a lot of depth to the jewelry, as well as the colors. They're beautiful. The Vintaj patinas are fun to work with, and you don't have to have some sort of fancy enameling machine or have to wait or use really harsh chemicals. They're kind of like in between an acrylic and like a nail polish type paint. So in this video is going to be just under 10 minutes long. These did not take me 10 minutes to make, so if you are looking at something like this, you're probably going to spend an hour or two making, shaping, cleaning, punching holes, and painting these earrings, and then you really should, before you try to assemble, wait 24 hours to let the patina truly dry. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe. If you are in the northern Colorado area and are interested in taking any classes, I do actually have a metal patina class coming up, and hopefully we'll have some more later this summer after festival season is over, and you can check that out at my website, which is rebelunicorncrafts.com. I'll have the link to that in the description as well.